Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for coming here today. We are here to give voice to a very important and personal issue, so thank you for coming. Firefighters provide an invaluable service to our communities. As first responders, they keep us safe, they give us peace of mind, and they risk their lives in the service of others. All that they ask is that their lives are not unnecessarily put at risk. On February 8th, Adam Brunt, a firefighter hopeful from Durham Region, tragically lost his life during a cold water training exercise in Hanover. This was an accident, but there are many disturbing questions that remain about the lack of regulation in the private safety training industry. Sadly, Adam's death is not an isolated incident. 5 years ago, volunteer firefighter Gary Kendall of Point Edward was also killed during a training exercise with the same company under similar circumstances, yet no regulatory changes have been made. Yesterday, I was encouraged to learn that the government has announced that it will be looking into regulation for this industry. However, the first of these deaths occurred more than 5 years ago, and we want to ensure that the government takes action before another 5 years has passed and another tragedy occurs. 5 years ago, the Kendall family called for a coroner's inquest. Unfortunately, that inquest did not occur, and there was no resulting regulation to prevent the accident that took Adam's life. We are pleased to offer this opportunity today for the families and loved ones of both Gary Kendall and Adam Brunt to publicly call for coroner's inquests. In support of the families, I have also written a letter to the Minister of Community Safety and Correctional Services asking for his support in joining their call. It is imperative we find out exactly what went wrong to ensure that the proper regulations are put in place. We must take the necessary steps to ensure that firefighting students are afforded the protection that they deserve. I want to finish again by thanking all of those in attendance today and by introducing our panel who will each deliver some brief remarks. First, we have Wes Mazer, a friend of the Kendall family, who will be reading a statement on their behalf. Secondly, beside him is Al Brunt, Adam's father, here on behalf of the family and his loved ones. And finally, thank you for coming. I'd introduce the president of the Ontario Professional Firefighters Association, Carmen Santoro. Thank you for being here today. Wes.
Great, thank you. The Kendall family is asking the province's coroner to open an inquest into the circumstances surrounding the death of Point Edward firefighter Gary Kendall, who died during ice water rescue training on January 31st, 2010. This matter is just as important now as it was when Gary died. In the death of Gary, certain safety protocols should have been taken that day to ensure everyone was safe. If an inquest had been called, safety measures could have been put into place in order to keep other lives safe while participating in ice water rescue training. There are specific questions surrounding Gary's death that the Kendall family would like answered. Why was no one held accountable as a supervisor for the training exercise? Why are there no regulations for ice water rescue training nor minimum qualifications for its trainers? Why aren't pre-training hazard assessments mandatory? Why weren't an adequate number of rescuers and rescue equipment readily available? Why wasn't a safety officer appointed for the training exercise? And what conditions make ice water rescue training dangerous, and were these conditions evaluated throughout the training exercise? On behalf of the Kendall family, our deepest sympathies are with Adam's family and his friends, and we would like to thank everyone who has given us their continued support over the years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Al?
Yes. On Feb 8th, my son Adam died while participating, in an ice and water training exercise conducted by a private party training provider. At the time, Adam was a student in the pre-firefighter course at Durham College in Oshawa. We have an opportunity today to acknowledge the circumstances of the Kendall family loss of Gary Kendall while he participated in an ice and water training session in 2010. We appear before you today in our personal capacity on behalf of our late son to fulfill a commitment to promote safety during all training activities for firefighters and students alike, to ensure that appropriate safety practices are continually followed in the future in all safety training courses. Firstly, in this regard, it is important to support the request of the Kendall family to carry out an inquest into the deaths of both Gary Kendall and Adam, to facilitate appropriate recommendations directed to safety courses generated by all rescue training, whether conducted by private or public training officers in the future. It is important that training instructors have an understanding of more than general safety principles and conducting courses, and we feel an inquest could provide affirmative guidelines which could be relevant for future training procedures. Secondly, we are here today requesting that the government complete a comprehensive review of the current legislation in order to provide a commitment to regulating private training activities provided to both professionals and non-professional participants. It is unacceptable that there are no clear directives that must be adhered to while providing training activities that may be serious and dangerous in nature. It is imperative that accountability be introduced so that private trainers are required to qualify for and adhere to programs that mandate the requirements for matters such as student-instructor ratios, training safety plans, hazard plans, emergency, incident mitigation or elimination, and other matters. Although current legislation may provide protection for professional firefighters under the Occupational Health and Safety Act for training opportunities, we advocate that it is time for protection to be provided to participants, whether professional firefighters, students, or private individuals involved in safety training courses. We recognize that this is a complicated area with many organizations and overlapping objectives, but it is time that individuals be protected while training to become protectors of the public interest. My family and I thank you.
I'd like to thank MPP Jennifer French for bringing attention to this issue. It's been a long time coming. So on behalf of Ontario's 11,000 professional firefighters, I'd like to start off by expressing our sincerest condolences to the Brunt family and the Kendall families. We are here to support the families in finding answers to what happened on those tragic days. Most recently, Adam's death hit home for us. His uncle is one of our members. And Adam's colleagues, those same students who enroll in courses, will ultimately become our members. They are all part of our extended family. Firefighters in the business of saving lives and property. We understand that with our profession come those inherent risks and dangers. We accept that as part of our duty to protect others. But no one should accept or expect any risks or dangers while in training. There are young women and men who are working tirelessly to better themselves, to qualify to become firefighters. They are enrolling in third-party companies to receive education and training. Those companies are currently not regulated, nor do they have to report to a higher body. That is a problem. The Ontario Professional Firefighters Association supports the call to have government place regulations on this industry, with the expectation that doing so will protect against any similar tragedies. In closing, to the Brunt family, we strongly support your call for a full public inquest into Adam's death. We need answers. Every recruit firefighter needs answers. The public needs answers, and most importantly, the family deserves answers into what happened that day. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions from the media?
Sorry for your loss, Mr. Brunt. We just got a note from about 10 minutes ago, from the 10 minutes before the news conference started, from the minister saying that he's directed senior officials to start reviewing the Private Career Colleges Act. Is this something? Had you heard of this before? What do you make of this action? This response now. I guess I'm trying to ask you to characterize what sort of response you've gotten from so far from the government about your concerns.
Well, as being here today, I think Jennifer's been very supportive of a request. What I see in the newspapers as late as 10 minutes ago, I think is very positive in the wording. I look forward to the outcome, to see what it brings forward.
When you've actually, though, spoken with people in the government, liberal government, ministers, any of those sort of people, what kind of response have they given you up until 10 minutes ago?
If you haven't seen it, the Premier did write a letter back expressing her condolences. We know that, of course, 5 years ago, both the Ministry of Labour and the Ministry of Training Colleges and Universities had looked at the situation after Gary Kendall's death and deemed that it wasn't under either jurisdiction. So the announcement yesterday that we're encouraged that the government understands there's a need for regulation and that they are prioritizing this group of trainees. The announcement 10 minutes ago, I think, continued that same line of commitment that they're going to review. What we would hope is that the families and that Ontarians see action so that we're not sitting here again in 5 years having the same conversation.
Can you just elaborate on their private members bill? So what is it exactly that it says? What regulation would be changed?
Well, as it stands now, there isn't a private members bill. I think the next step of this process is it needs to be an action step. We always call for consultation, but it's not just consultation in this case. It's going to be a matter of the government, connecting with the experts in the field who know what the regulation should look like, so that this is going to be the most effective change to protect our future firefighters. So what that will look like remains to be seen, but it needs to be appropriately informed and actually be an action step that we do see. So if it's a private member's bill, if it's a change to legislation.
Mr. Santoro, you were talking about what sort of new regulation you could have in terms of ratio, in terms of training, in terms of certification and so on. Do you have an idea of what you would like to see?
Well, I mean, there's rules and regulations in place for our professional firefighters who are on the job. When we train, there's a student to teacher ratio, there's safety officers, there's rapid intervention teams. I mean, the list goes on. And, as firefighters, we don't have the right to refuse dangerous work at a fire scene, but at training centers or in a training scenario, everything has to be absolutely safe during any evolution that we do. And we have the right to refuse work at that point if there's anything that's not that we feel is not safe or not following the regulations. But we always take every precaution before any kind of training evolution.
Are you concerned that having both a coroner's inquest and this kind of review process at the same time could either compete or delay one or the other? Like, can they?
I see them as two separate processes. That it's I don't want to say a two-pronged attack, but two-pronged approach. This is an important. Today was important also for the families to have the public space. As we see, these are similar circumstances, tragic, but there's a question there. So calling for coroner's inquests today would start a process that needs to be followed, and hopefully that's what we see. When it comes to the Ministry of Labor investigations, the police investigations, the various investigations, those are also ongoing. But in the interim, the government can be taking action now to be connecting with those in the field who would best inform, connecting with the families as well.
Carmen, can you talk a little bit about why so many young potential firefighters participate in these private programs and how they choose them as far as you know?
Sure. 25, 30 years ago, I was also one of those students, and it's very competitive to become a firefighter, and these students are seeking as much training as they can to better prepare themselves for full-time duty as a firefighter. And because of the competitiveness, they're seeking various courses or education to set themselves above the thousands of others who are out there being trained to become firefighters.
Mr. Brunt, what can you say about the quality of the safety measures that were in place at this training facility where your son was?
I don't deem myself an expert in that area of information. All I can say at this point is I look forward to the investigation that is ongoing and the details that they bring up and the issues that they highlight as a result of that, because they are the experts in that area. So.
Talk to you at all about concerns that he had? Did he, about how he felt the training was being run? No.
Obviously, I never got to talk to him after, but no, absolutely not. I mean, when you're seeking or going after your aspiration, that's not something they generally, thing. I mean, they're I still like to call them kids. They're not. They're of age, but I mean, sometimes they don't see it because you're so into the moment and understanding, as I said, the competitive edge, that sometimes you forgo the obvious.
If I may, the nature of these pre-service training courses is that they're very technical, they're very specific, and oftentimes a weekend course. So as Carmen was saying, that there's a lot of competition, so they'll take these courses with the assumption that they are safe, with the understanding that the instructor has a certain level of qualification, that the certificate that they're achieving has a certain value. So right now, as it stands, none of these courses are regulated. There isn't that standard. There isn't that guarantee, but there still is that assumption. So that's why it's so important to close the loophole and ensure that students who may not question safety because they don't have the training, they don't have the background, are going to be protected, because ultimately they want to keep us safe, so we need to keep them safe.
Why isn't there automatic coroner's inquests into these? Because any workplace death is an automatic inquest. Do you know why there isn't an automatic inquest in this?
I might be able to actually answer that. Just as somebody in the safety profession, the only automatic inquests are into construction fatalities. They don't apply to industrial or any other industry in the province at this point in time. Mining may also be an exception to that, but that is a very good question as to why is it not mandatory for all workplace fatalities in the province.
Well, in fairness, it's not a workplace fatality because they're trainees.
Absolutely,
But
yeah.
not trainees, it's a...
Yeah, I guess with two different...
limbo.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's sort of in limbo. It's that gray area, the loophole, if you would, where this was a private training course with students, not anybody necessarily at this point that we know through a workplace. A little bit different story 5 years ago in 2010 with Gary Kendall's fatality. That was in fact deemed a workplace.
So when that accident occurred, were you given a firm answer as to why there was never any follow-up to it?
No. There's been quite a bit of history in the last 5 years that I'd be happy to answer questions of, but in following Gary's death, the Kendall family was told by the Crown prosecutor that they would be requesting an inquest. I believe that was also mentioned on the record in Mr. Harrison's trial related to Gary's death, but there has been no action to date. Attempts to contact the Minister of Labour in the last 5 years with also no reply.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for coming. We appreciate your giving voice to this.